The alarm bells and RAF Koningsby began ringing at 2:17 a.m. on a cold November morning. Wing Commander James Sterling woke up instantly, his heart racing in the darkness of his small bedroom. He had been flying fighter jets for 23 years, and his body still remembered every emergency call with the same jolt of adrenaline. James jumped out of bed, threw on his flight suit, and ran toward the corridor. His boots echoed on the concrete floor as other pilots emerged from their rooms, their faces tight with focus and determination. Nobody spoke. They didn't need to. This was what they trained for every single day of their lives. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Down in the main briefing room, the situation was already tense. Two American F-35 jets had crossed into restricted British airspace without permission. This wasn't just a simple mistake. Intelligence suggested they were testing British defenses, checking if anyone would respond. The entire squadron had been caught off guard. America was supposed to be an ally, a partner in the sky. But protocols existed for a reason, and those protocols had to be followed. James walked into the room and found his commanding officer, Air Commodore David Mitchell, standing in front of a large tactical map. Mitchell's face was grim and serious. "We've got two bandits at 45,000 feet, Mitchell said, using the military term for unidentified aircraft. They crossed the coast near Norfolk 10 minutes ago. They're heading straight for London. We need to intercept them and find out what the bloody hell they're doing." James felt his chest tighten. An intercept meant flying at maximum speed. It meant putting his Eurofighter Typhoon through its paces. It meant standing in the face of machines that were supposed to be cutting-edge and new. The F-35 was the most advanced fighter jet in the world. Everyone knew this. The media had talked about nothing else for years. The Eurofighter had been built in the 90s. Many people said it was outdated. Many people had laughed at it. "Get your best pilot in the air," Mitchell commanded. "I want you up there in 5 minutes, James. No more, no less." James nodded without hesitation. He was already running. His teammate, Squadron Leader Tom Harris, caught up with him in the equipment room. Tom was younger, faster, and hungry to prove himself. They had flown together for 6 years and trusted each other completely. "Are we really doing this?" Tom asked, his voice shaking slightly with excitement and fear mixed together. "Against American F-35s? That's crazy." James looked at his friend and smiled calmly. "No, it's not crazy," he said quietly. "It's our job, and we're going to do it right." By 2:23 a.m., both pilots were in their jets on the runway. The wind was brutal, coming from the north in harsh, angry gusts. James sat in the cockpit of his Eurofighter, feeling the familiar weight of the controls under his hands. The screens in front of him glowed green and blue in the darkness. His radio crackled with orders from the ground. The engines began their powerful roar, building up steam and fury. Behind him, Tom was doing the same thing in his own jet. They had done this 1,000 times before, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like it meant something more. "We're cleared for takeoff," the ground controller said. "Go get them, Falcon 1. That was James's call sign. Falcon 1. He had earned it 20 years ago on his first deployment. James pushed the throttle forward, and the jet began to move. The runway stretched out before him in the darkness like a ribbon of black silk. He checked his instruments one more time. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. The speed increased. The acceleration pushed him back into his seat. And then, at exactly 2:28 a.m., the wheels left the ground. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The sky was empty and cold and vast. James climbed higher and higher, watching the world below disappear into darkness. His radar showed him the two F-35s now. They were moving fast, heading southwest toward London. James could see their position clearly on his screen. He pushed his throttle into afterburner, and the Eurofighter responded immediately. The acceleration was incredible, nearly forcing the breath from his lungs. Tom was right beside him, in perfect formation. They climbed together like two hawks hunting the same prey. The radio buzzed. "Falcon 1, this is Control. The F-35s are not responding to our hails. They're maintaining course and speed. You are cleared to make visual contact. James's mouth went dry. Visual contact meant they would actually see each other face to face in the sky. This was no longer a game on radar screens. This was real. This was dangerous. He reached out mentally to the sky, to whatever forces might be listening up here in the darkness. Then he pushed the jet harder. At 3:41 a.m., James saw them. Two bright spots of light against the night sky, their afterburners glowing like burning coals. The F-35s were flying in formation, moving with confidence and power. James knew that the pilots in those jets were probably seeing him on their radar now. They were probably wondering who this crazy pilot was. Try to catch them. James made a decision. He was going to get close enough to establish visual contact, close enough to show them that Britain was not a country to be trifled with. He dove slightly to get a better angle. The radio crackled again, but this time it was a different voice. An American accent, cold and professional. Unknown aircraft, this is Spear 1. You are approaching restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately. James felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was the moment where everything could go wrong. But he stayed calm. He had trained for this. This is Falcon 1, RAF Koningsby. You are in violation of British airspace. Prepare for escort. The American pilot was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. The Eurofighter, he said mockingly. We were wondering when you guys would show up. Good luck catching us, old-timer. The words stung, but James refused to let them affect him. These American pilots were flying the most advanced jets in the world. They probably thought the Eurofighter was a relic, but they didn't understand something important. They didn't understand that the Eurofighter was built for this exact kind of fight. It was built for close combat, for turning sharply, for surprising opponents. James looked at his fuel gauge and made a choice. He wasn't going to play it safe. He wasn't going to follow protocol. He was going to teach these American pilots a lesson they would never forget. Tom, James said calmly into his radio. Follow my lead. We're going to do something a little dangerous. Tom's response came back immediately. I'm with you. Whatever you're thinking, I'm in. James took a deep breath and then executed a maneuver that most pilots wouldn't dare attempt at this altitude and speed. He pulled the stick back hard, pointing his nose up at a 70-degree angle. The jet climbed vertically, and for a moment, James felt weightless. His vision tunneled. His heart thundered in his chest. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the about you're watching from. The F-35 pilots reacted too late. They were still flying straight, still thinking they were superior. By the time they realized what was happening, James had already rolled his jet and was coming around behind them. This was the classic dogfighting move called the Herbst maneuver. It was dangerous, it was aggressive, and it was incredibly effective. James's Eurofighter suddenly appeared on their tail, perfectly positioned. The first F-35 pilot saw him and cursed through the radio. What the? How did you? James didn't let him finish. He was already turning, moving with grace and precision that seemed almost supernatural. Tom came around on the other side, mirroring James's movements perfectly. Suddenly, the two American jets were surrounded. They were being controlled, being herded like cattle by two British pilots in jets that the world had dismissed and forgotten. The first F-35 tried to climb, but James was already climbing with him, staying right on his tail. The second F-35 tried to dive, but Tom was there too, matching his every move, his every desperate attempt to escape. 4 or 5 minutes. Nothing but silence filled the radio except for the sound of breathing and the occasional radio communication back to headquarters. James was sweating now, his hands gripping the controls with intense focus. He could feel the G-forces pressing down on him, pushing him into his seat with the weight of several elephants. His entire body screamed with effort and strain. But he refused to break concentration. This wasn't just about proving a point. This was about his country. This was about showing the world that Britain still had the best pilots, the most skilled, the most courageous. The Eurofighter wasn't outdated. It was legendary. And right now, in the cold darkness of the sky above Britain, it was proving that to the entire world. The first F-35 pilot crackled through the radio. His voice had changed now. The mockery was gone. replaced by something else. Respect, maybe, or fear, or both. Falcon 1, he said, you've got incredible skills. We need to return to base. Our fuel is getting low. James smiled grimly. His fuel wasn't low. He could keep flying all night if he wanted to. But he let the American pilot go anyway. He pulled back on the stick and veered away, allowing the F-35 to escape. Tom did the same with the second jet. The two American pilots broke formation and headed back north toward the coast. They never spoke another word. They didn't need to. Everyone listening to the radio, everyone watching the radar screens, everyone in every military command center that had been monitoring this encounter, they all understood what had just happened. A supposedly outdated British fighter jet had just dominated two of the most advanced American aircraft in the world. The news would spread like wildfire through military channels across the globe. James and Tom flew back to RAF Koningsby in silence, each lost in his own thoughts. The landing at 5:53 a.m. was smooth and perfect, the kind of landing that only comes after years of practice and muscle memory. As James climbed out of his cockpit, exhausted and shaking with adrenaline, he saw the entire squadron waiting for him on the tarmac. They were cheering, clapping him on the back, asking questions. But James barely heard them. He was thinking about his country. He was thinking about those pilots who had laughed at the Eurofighter. He was thinking about everything that people had dismissed and forgotten. In the debriefing room later that morning, Air Commodore Mitchell sat down across from James with a stern expression. For a moment, James thought he was going to be disciplined, maybe reprimanded for being too aggressive, for taking too many risks. But then Mitchell smiled. You went off protocol, he said quietly. You took a risk that could have gone very wrong. But you showed those Americans something important today. You showed them that Britain's Air Force is not something to be trifled with. Well done, Falcon 1. The story of that night spread across military channels and eventually into the news. Headlines around the world proclaimed, they laughed at Britain's Eurofighter. Then it humbled two F-35s. The American military issued a quiet statement about the incident. They called it a training exercise. They claimed they had been testing British defenses. But everyone knew the truth. Everyone understood that the Eurofighter, that supposedly outdated machine, had just proven itself to be one of the most remarkable flying machines ever built. It had proven that experience, skill, and courage could overcome even the most advanced technology in the world. James never saw those American pilots again. Years later, he would hear that one of them had requested transfer to a different role. The pilot never flew combat jets again. James felt a small amount of sympathy for him. Flying is a calling, a passion that becomes part of your soul. Taking that away from someone is a kind of death, a kind of loss that only other pilots can truly understand. But for James, life went on as it always did. He continued flying, continued training, continued pushing the Eurofighter to its absolute limits. Younger pilots would come and ask him for advice. He would tell them the same thing every single time. Never underestimate your opponent, but never overestimate them either. The best pilots are not the ones with the best equipment. They are the ones with the strongest hearts and the sharpest minds. They are the ones willing to take risks, willing to sacrifice, willing to do whatever it takes to protect their people and their country. This was the lesson of that night, when the Eurofighter proved to the world that it was far from finished.